Hey, everybody, what's going on? How's everybody doing? All right. Hey, everybody. Let's see here. Who we got? Well, congratulations to Amy for being the first comment tonight, and for Brats and Karen. That's good. All right. Let's see who else. Who's gonna? Is that Tina? Tina Bird is here. Hi, Tina. Hi, Marcia. Teresa, Miriam is here. Hi, Daryl. Christina's in the house. Eric Gurman's back tonight. Good to see you, buddy. Deb is here. Hi, Dave and Amy. Hey, Scott Moran. Grandkids came over, made veggie soup. Homemade veggie soup and Pastor Tim tonight. Life is good. I'm not going to try to compete with veggie soup, though. I know better than that. Hey, Jess. Hey, Suze. Hi, Cheryl. Farmer widow tonight. All right. Well, hope he's safe and has a good evening out there tonight. Parker, what's going on, buddy? Hi, Margie and Doug. Let's see, Christina, Eric, Amy. Hi, Suze. I think I got it right. Tim and Candy in the house. Good to see you. Crystal Dove just got back from Indian Lake watching your grandchildren today, so you're probably exhausted, but glad you made it. Hey, Ange. Jim has shingles. What are you going to do that for? Tell Jim he's to get better immediately. Hey, Kendra. And Jess Mack is here tonight, too. How you doing, Jess? Okay, I have a very strange story for you tonight. You guys remember when I ordered the books for the next study we're doing for the Christian Atheist? You guys remember that? I had I got on and I had to order them in two different things. I ordered one set of books that I ordered 2 books from one seller. I ordered 7 books from another seller for a total of 9. I got the 2 books, I think it was Friday or Saturday of last week. So I got that shipment. Everything was good. So I thought, well, that's cool. And I passed them out to Sunday. A couple of you got them. Well, tonight I was at my house. I got a shipment of 2 more books, which is not the 7 I was expecting. So I got online to find out what was going on to email the guy, said he owes me some more books. And turns out the guy who sent me 7 books haven't been delivered yet. So apparently the guy who sent me 2 books sent me 4 books. So I now have 2 more copies of this book. That was my long story of saying that I now have 2 extra copies of the book that I was not expecting. I'm assuming that means I'm going to end up with 11. I don't know that for fact, but that's what appears to me. So I have 2 more copies of The Christian Atheist, which we'll be looking at once we're through with Daniel. And so there it is. So I got 2 more copies. If any of you want to get in touch with me, my plan is we're not going to start The Christian Atheist until Sunday night because I want a chance to have a Sunday to pass out books. So any of you who think you may not be here Sunday, if you think you're going to be here Sunday, let's just go with that. I'll give you one Sunday. God willing, they'll be here. In fact, they should be here. What is today? Tuesday. They're supposed to be here on Thursday. I checked. They're somewhere in Illinois. So I hope that they'll be here. But if you, for whatever reason, are not going to be here for the live service on Sunday, I'm talking the service in the parking lot, and you need a physical copy of the book, let me know that, and I will make arrangements to get one of these 2 copies to you. So if you're going to be here Sunday, don't worry about it. I should have plenty. And if you can get digital copies of the book, please do that. Go to Amazon or go to one of the library apps or something to get one. But please go get your own. But if you need a physical copy of the book, I have a few more copies coming. If you don't think you're going to be here for the parking lot service Sunday, let me know that, and I will make arrangements to get them to you. Now, as you will notice, I'm here in the friendly confines of my office. My hope was to be in the sanctuary tonight on the new device. I had the most frustrating day to the point that I thought my brain was going to explode. I went to 3 different audiovisual stores and called a 4th one. And then I contacted Canon. Apparently, I can't get the converter that I need to put the sanctuary computer on, or put the camera on the sanctuary computer. Everybody can see the camera is right there. So the camera is here in my office. I was intending to use it tonight, and because technology is stupid, I can't. So you guys can keep on me. I'm going to figure out how to get live streams on that computer down there. I'm just not probably going to be able to do it this week because I'm going to have to order something online because the 4 audiovisual stores I contacted in this area, none of them had what I needed. So why in that big bundle of cords and wires I got when I bought the camera, they didn't give me that one, I don't know. I'm super happy that they didn't, and I'm not at all aggravated about that. And so there you go. But just know I burned up an entire day today trying to run down that cord, and despite my sincerest efforts, I was not successful. So there you go. Sometimes we try, and then we have to live to fight another day, and that's eventually what about 3:30. That's what I decided. I was aggravated enough. I just went home. So. All right. Wow, that's my whole day in 6 minutes. So, all right. Yeah, thank you. Joe, I'll tell you exactly the cord that I need. It needs to go from a little HDMI cord to a regular size HDMI cord. That's the cord that I need. Walmart didn't have it. Bruns Audio and Salina didn't have it. Fowler TV didn't have it. And I called the guy in Lima who has a store, and I can't remember it. I don't remember the guy's name now, but it was the audio store in Lima. They didn't have it. So that's the cord I need, Joe. If you can help me with that, I will say less bad things about you, and that would be awesome. So how was I supposed to know? I was just supposed to ask you, dude. I did not know that, Joe. I'm asking you now. For the love of God, please, if you have one of these cords, I need it, and I need it in like a desperation kind of way. So, all right, if Joe Sutton comes up with this cord, perhaps tomorrow night we will be down in the sanctuary. It's a mini HDMI cord to a regular size HDMI cord. And if you have that, and if you have an extension HDMI cord so I can move around the sanctuary, that would be even more awesome. So you can look at that and let me know. We can talk later, Joe. So, okay. All right. Thank you for all listening to me vent. I feel like my soul has been liberated because I was feeling. Oh, don't go check now, man. I'm going to dispense some knowledge here for you, Joe. Don't be going now. But yeah, I felt like I was fighting the monster with the. I felt like I was fighting the monster with the iron teeth and the bear with the bone teeth all day today because. Phew, man. All right. Okay, so then Joe will be my favorite. He'll be my second favorite, Joyce, because you'll always be my favorite. So, all right, very good. Okay, all right. I have 41 people logged in here tonight. I have to actually do some content now. All right, so we're going to Daniel chapter 8 to read about another vision. Now, last 2 nights actually. We talked through 2 cycles of Daniel's dream. It was kind of the dream that he had and sort of how he came across to him. And then he talked about the interpretation when he kind of pulled one of the angels off to the side and said, "Hey, dude, can you fill in some blanks here for me?" And they had a conversation. So that was the dream we had last night. Tonight we're going on to another vision that Daniel had. And this is coming from Daniel chapter 8. So any of you who want to follow along in your Bible, we're going to Daniel chapter 8. And we're going to read about a goat, actually. All right. During the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. Now, if you'll recall, both of the first 2 visions that we have read about are both centered during Belshazzar's reign. So, and if you remember, Belshazzar during the regular Daniel story, which was the first half of the book, Belshazzar really only had, if you remember him, he's the king of the 3 kings we know about. We knew about Nebuchadnezzar, the Persian. We knew about Belshazzar and then Darius the Mede. Those are the 3 kings we knew about. Daniel successfully converted, or you say God through Daniel successfully converted both Nebuchadnezzar and Darius. So he converted both of those guys. We don't really know what happened with Belshazzar. In fact, we don't even have a record that Belshazzar and Daniel actually had much to do with each other, because the only story we have in the story portion of the book of Daniel is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego going into the fiery furnace. Which a story that Daniel, I mean, that's a thing Daniel's not mentioned in. I'm sure Daniel was upset about it, but Daniel was not a part of the fiery furnace fiasco, I guess is what we can call it. And all that happened during Belshazzar's reign. So while Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are going to a barbecue, Daniel's visions seem to be kicking into gear, because the first two visions we read about are from Belshazzar's reign. So while we don't get much information about Belshazzar in the story portion of Daniel, we do get two visions recorded by Daniel during Belshazzar's reign. So that's what we got. So along with the and if you remember, it was Belshazzar was the one who built the great tower, and the foundation of the tower was clay. And all of us good structural engineers said, building a giant tower with clay as a foundation. I'm not an engineer, but that seems like a terrible idea. And but that's what happened. And as you could imagine, with a big tower with a clay foundation, it fell over. So that was what happened earlier. And actually, I'm mixing my visions here, aren't I? That was the dream. He built the statue that was going to have the people pray to it when the instruments played, and they basically said, we're not going to pray to that. And he says, then you're going to be the main course at the barbecue, and we all know how that worked out. So that was the statue was what happened during Belshazzar's reign. All right, I'm getting all my stuff mixed up here. I got too much Daniel bounced around in my head. Okay, so chapter 8, verse 1. During the third year of Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, saw another vision following the one that had already appeared. So he's identifying this is vision number 2. In this vision, I was at the fortress of Susa in the province of Elam, standing along the Ulai River. Okay, I want you to understand, we don't know where any of those things are. Okay, I mean, we could go look up where they are. What I'm saying is, if I said I was standing under the water tower in St. Mary's, Ohio, almost all of you are going to know exactly where that is. I understand it's covered by tarps right now, but you know where the water tower is. even covered up, you know where it's at. So everybody gets a good idea, and we all can understand. The original people who heard Daniel's story would heard him say, Fortress of Susa, province of Elam, by the Ulai River. They'd be like, I know exactly where that is. There's a tree there, and there's the flowers that grow. And they would have known it. This was a very specific location. This isn't saying, well, during this one time I was someplace. No, this is very specific. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the fortress of Susa is also mentioned in the book of Esther. So Esther has one of the final stands of the people of God in Esther also comes at the fortress of Susa. So a little bit of cross history there. So in this vision, I was at the fortress of Susa in the province of Elam, standing by the Ulai River. As I looked up, I saw a ram with 2 long horns standing beside the river. Okay, so there's a big ram by the river. Hey, Cheryl and Jack, welcome. Good to see you. So the ram is there, 2 long horns. I mean, we've seen a ram before. I'm going to be honest with you. My high school mascot was a ram, so I'm very familiar with rams. So the ram was there, and everything seems good. Rams are, there's a model of car called Ram, the Dodge Ram. So, I mean, the Ram is kind of a tough animal. We think very differently about a ram than we do about, say, a turtle or there's a reason why nobody's high school was the Fighting Peacocks or something like that. It's not a very awe-inspiring animal, but a ram. And there's a lot of schools around who have rams as their mascot. So, the Los Angeles Rams, a football team. So Rams are, again, a fearsome animal. So this is a fierce animal, and one that will ram into you if You step out of line or whatever. So it's an animal you don't want to mess with. My computer's not setting up very well. Okay, so all right. Okay, so as I looked up, I saw a ram with 2 long horns standing beside the river. One of the horns was longer than the other, even though it had grown later than the other one. I'm having a hard time with this. As I looked up, I saw a ram with 2 long horns standing beside the river. One of the horns was longer than the other, even though it had grown later. It had grown later than the other one. It's like a bunch of words that don't fit together. It had grown later than the other one. I guess not only did he know how the size of the 2 horns on the ram, but he also knew when they grew in, and the later one was the shorter one, apparently. Okay, I don't know enough about physiology of rams to speak to that, but maybe that has something to do with it. Okay, but there's a ram standing there, and it's got 2 horns, one of them bigger than the other. The ram butted everything out of its way to the west, to the north, and to the south. Okay, so this is a big ram. Anything come into his territory, he's headbutting it out of there. And no one could stand against him or help his victims. He did as he pleased and became very great, which is what we would expect a ram to do. You know, a ram is a ferocious animal. Okay, so imagine what kind of a warrior would you expect to take on a ram? Would you think maybe like a cougar or a cheetah or a lion, maybe an elephant, a rhinoceros, maybe one of the fearsome creatures we read about the last 2 nights in the previous vision, some kind of monster? I mean what is going to challenge the ram? I mean, what kind of fearsome, ferocious, tough animal is going to take it on? Well, let's find out. To the bully on the block here, the ram that was knocking everybody out of his way. Verse 5. While I was watching, suddenly a male goat. Is that what y'all thought I was going to say? Male goat? I mean, goats can be mean. They can be a little territorial, and they will eat just about anything. But that's another one of those animals that could you imagine your school mascot being the fighting goats or the eating goats? Or again, not what I was expecting. And it gets worse. Okay, so it's a male goat, and it appeared from the west. And you'll know that the west was one of the direction that the ram didn't want anybody coming from. So he was attacking people coming from all those directions. He crossed the land so swiftly he didn't even touch the ground. Okay, so you got a male goat that didn't touch the ground. That's an interesting description. And they can be very bad. That's right, Tina. So the male goat that doesn't touch the ground because he moves so fast. I don't know if he had jet propulsion. Somehow he didn't touch the ground, so he's super tough. And this goat had one very large horn between its eyes. Any of you artistic here tonight? Can you draw this goat for me? I mean, if I said, hey, here's a fearsome creature that doesn't touch the ground and has a big horn between its eyes, are you thinking, oh, sounds like a goat? Anybody going with the goat on that one? Anybody think that describes any goat you've ever seen? Because I don't want to claim to be an authority on goats without taking the opportunity to think that maybe they float. I didn't. Maybe they do. I don't know. Okay, so one very large horn between his eyes, and he floated. Verse 6, he headed toward the 2-horned ram. Horns are kind of a thing for Daniel. I mean, we noticed that yesterday. In the last 2 days, there was the horn that kept that had a mouth and kept boasting, and God Thanos'd it out. But so here we got more horns. Got ram with horns. We got a goat with a weird horn growing out of its head. Okay, so verse 6, he headed toward the 2-horned ram that I had seen standing beside the river, rushing at him in a rage. So this goat was mad. The goat charged furiously at the ram and struck him, breaking off both of his horns. Now, okay, So we have an impact. We have the ram who's just knocking everybody away. Anybody who comes up there, just knocking them out. It doesn't matter. So the goat comes up here and says, I having this. So he takes off so fast toward the ram. I mean, he has no fear. So he's flying toward the ram at full speed. So fast he's barely touching the ground with this unicorn horn or something, and he hits the ram. Now, my first inclination would be to say, if he was going that fast, had one long horn, it says, right in the middle of his forehead, kind of like a unicorn, and he hit the ram. I promise I'm not going to get graphic with this, but I would think he would impale the ram. I mean, that's what it seems like would happen, is that the big horn would stab the ram and then the ram would die. Okay, that logically, that feels like what would happen in this scenario. Okay, but that's not what happened. When the goat made contact with the ram, he knocked off both of his horns. So where we all thought, well, he's going to kill the ram, and he does eventually, I believe he does. He first took away his power. Okay, so verse 7, let's read this again. Verse 7, the goat charged furiously at the ram and struck him, breaking off both his horns. Now the ram was helpless. See, the ram seemed to be almost invincible against any enemy except this goat. Now the ram was helpless, and the goat knocked him down and trampled him. No one could rescue the ram from the goat's power. Okay, again, there's probably a sentence that there is literally no other scenario where that sentence would make sense, to say no one could rescue the ram from the goat's power. That verse is probably the only time that sentence could ever be said in the history of the world. Cheryl says, does this have anything to do with the goats and the sheep being separated by God in the end times? It could. I mean, the imagery obviously is very similar. I don't know, because what Jesus was saying there more when he spoke about that is he was speaking more about, if I recall, he was speaking more about his followers will be honored and those who are not his followers were not. I don't believe that parable has anything to do with vanquishing anybody. I may have to go back and reread that, but I don't think that there's a violent aspect to that. And I don't think that at any point when they're separated that they're told to attack each other. Where that's clearly what's going on here. The goat decided he was fed up with the ram, so he knocked him out and trampled him. So the imagery is the same, and the idea that these are two obviously different animals, and that's something clear. And the ram was behaving arrogantly and making problems, much like in Jesus's analogy. But I think more we want to see here, and I was going to get to this in a minute, but we will, look at this, is in this particular scenario, and this is going to change as we read the rest of the way through this chapter. But in this particular place, the goat was chosen as the champion, or chosen is the wrong word. He was used as the champion. God often, every once in a while, a situation will get so out of control and get so messed up that God has to do something extreme to get it set back right. Every once in a while, when there's a maniac on the loose, God's got to send a maniac after them, because that's sometimes the only way you can take that on. This ram was being a problem. Whatever it was doing, it was causing trouble. So God sent a champion. This so happened to be a very, very fast goat with a horn in the middle of its head. But hey, Marge, we're glad to have you. But the idea here is that it was used as God's champion. Now, there's still a standard that has to be upheld, which we're about. I don't want to get too far ahead because we're going to read about that. But the idea is that in this particular situation, God used the goat as a champion. All right, here we go. I lost where I was at. What did I just read? Verse 7. Now the ram. Okay, verse 7. Verse 8. This is after the goat tramples the ram. The goat became very powerful, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off. So, from the way I read this, and again, this is open to interpretation. In the conflict, the goat did not lose the unicorn horn. Okay, he didn't lose it fighting the ram, but in the midst of attaining all this power, he did lose the horn, and the horn was apparently the source of his power, much like Samson's strength came from his hair. Well, the analogy here is that the goat got his power from this horn. Okay, so so the large horn was broken off. In the large horn's place grew four prominent horns pointing in four directions of the earth, unlike the ram, who was only fighting in three directions. For whatever reason, the ram was not fighting to the east. He was only north, south, and west. Okay. Okay, so the powerful horn was broken off. It was replaced by one that grew in four directions. Again, I can't. I have pretty active imagination. I have a hard time picturing this. From one of the prominent horns came a small horn whose power grew very great. Here we're back to this again. It extended toward the south and the east. Apparently, the goat never turned his head much, because normally when I say, you know, my hair's getting long, and look at this, this is growing to the west, and this is growing to the east, and this is growing to the south. I mean, it may feel like it's growing that way, but that's not generally how we describe these things. But this particular goat did. Okay, so from one of the prominent horns came a small horn whose power grew very great. It extended toward the south and the east and toward the glorious land of Israel, back to where the people of God were exiled from. 10. Its power reached to the heavens, where it attacked the heavenly army, throwing some of the heavenly beings and some of the stars to the ground and trampling them. Okay, my friends, this was one serious goat. I mean, not only did the goat manage to run so fast he didn't touch the ground and take on a ram and win, now he's grown so powerful. He's got all these huge horns growing everywhere, and now he's challenging heavenly beings and fighting angels and trampling them. I mean, this is one goat you don't want to cross, folks, because this goat ain't having it. So thanks for asking. So the goat may have been used as a champion to get rid of the ram, but the goat wasn't necessarily a hero, wasn't necessarily a good guy. So for the first part of this vision, what I would say is that God can use, I mean, for lack of a better term, God can use anyone as a battering ram, even a goat. So God can use bad people to accomplish his purposes. And we all can cite examples of that, you know, down through history or even from our own personal lives, where God used something that was less than ideal to do something great. On the other hand, though, that's not going to end up saving the goat. I feel weird even saying that, but that's not going to save the goat, because the goat is stepping out of line. And as the beast from the previous vision learned, being out of line is not where you want to be. So, all right. Okay, so let's go on to hear more about what this goat did after it took out the ram and challenged the heavenly army and threw down some heavenly beings and did all these things. Verse 11. It even challenged the commander of heaven's army by canceling the daily sacrifices offered to him and by destroying his temple. It's that's a pretty significant line in the sand. You remember Belshazzar. I'm getting confused now. The writing on the wall guy, whichever king he was, he got in trouble because he was just using the artifacts from the temple. He was drinking wine out of the temple, and all of a sudden they saw this disembodied hand start writing on the wall. All he was doing was he wasn't destroying anything. He just was using these cups and sacred things in ways that they were not supposed to be used. And that got him in trouble. Now this goat knocked down the temple and stopped the sacrifices and did all these things. And as you can imagine, that's going to be a problem. Okay, verse 12. The army of heaven was restrained from responding to this rebellion. So the daily sacrifice was halted and truth was overthrown. So God's God's army wanted to come down and respond to this and take what I'm sure were drastic measures to set things right. They were withheld, and because they were withheld, this God allowed this thing to happen. So once the ram was taken out, this goat went on to become very, very powerful and began to make real problems for people. Okay, verse 13. Then I heard two holy ones talking to each other. Okay, so we're back to the kind of company of the millions of angels. And Daniel suddenly hears two guys talking to each other. So he obviously, as any of us would, started eavesdropping on their conversation. One of them asked, "How long will these events of this vision last? How long will the rebellion that causes desecration stop the daily sacrifices? How long will the temple and heaven's armies be trampled on?" The other one replied, "It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the temple will be made right again." 2,300 evenings and mornings. That's a long time. And I'm trying to think. Numbers are always significant. I was trying to see if 2,300 went into anywhere close to 3.5 years. The number's a little off, but so basically there's a time limit on this. It looks to me to be about 7 years, approximately. If you take, I know they went by a lunar calendar back in those days, which was a little shorter than our Roman calendar. So it was about 300 approximately days a year. So if you go 300 days a year, it's right about 7 years, maybe even a little bit longer, that they would have been away. So and it seems like from the way these two guys are talking, they are just this has just started. So this goat has just recently become the big problem. And so it's going to take 7 years to get it right. And as we talked about last night, seven, nothing's complete till it happens 7 times. Okay, so that's the whole vision. You got the timetable, you got the events, you got the creatures, you got the weirdness, you got heaven's army involved, unable to stand against the goat, this crazy goat that's here. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit of interpretation. Verse 15. As I, Daniel, was trying to understand the meaning of the vision, someone who looked like a man stood in front of me. I heard a human voice call out from the Ulai River, "Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision." So the archangel Gabriel is now here, and God has asked Gabriel to do some interpreting. So Gabriel appeared to Daniel in the form of, in a human form of some kind. And so Gabriel is going to come up and give some insight to Daniel what's going on. Verse 17. As Daniel approached the place where I was standing, I became so terrified that I fell with my face to the ground. My friends, I think that that's an appropriate response. When an archangel walks up to you, is to tremble and fall on the ground. That seems to be a very appropriate response. One that I would probably also have utilized at that point. I probably would have also tried groveling and perhaps even crying if that would have been me. So, Son of Man, he said, which is I know he talked about how Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. Son of Man is sort of a term of respect, like sir or mister or something like that. Son of Man, he said, you must understand the events that you have seen in your vision relate to the times of the end. While he was speaking, verse 18, while he was speaking, I fainted and lay there with my face to the ground. So Gabriel says, all right, dude, I want you to pay close attention. And the first thing Daniel does is pass out. Daniel gets an F for his first effort. I think we could all agree that passing out is the polar opposite of paying close attention. So Daniel passes out, but Gabriel shakes him like, dude, slaps him a few times, gets him awake. But Gabriel roused me with a touch and helped me to my feet, which is a very polite thing to do. I mean, he's very intimidated by Gabriel. Again, no blame from me. I would have been intimidated myself. But Gabriel helps him up, and just kind of a very nice thing to do. Then he said, I am here to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. What you have seen pertains to the very end of time. Okay. Now, what I need you to understand with what we're about to read is I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. Tell you what. Let's use the example of the sermon from last Sunday. I'm assuming most of you were either here for the parking lot service or you've watched one of the worship services. I was talking about the other guy from the book of Ruth. And I talked about how he had given up so much in his life because he'd given up confidence. The guy clearly had no confidence because he has really no bearing on the story. Boaz was not at all concerned that he was going to be a threat to take Ruth because the guy had no spine. I mean, I talked about a lot of those things. That's probably not a character that many sermons have ever been preached on, the other guy from the book of Ruth. But that story has existed. The story of Ruth has existed for a long time, thousands of years. And you can imagine in thousands of years, while there hasn't been a ton of sermons on the other guy from the book of Ruth, there have been other sermons. And what pastors and preachers and rabbis and teachers have done down through the years is they and this is my job today. I am in the apostolic succession. My job is tasked to do this exact same thing that thousands of years of people who did a job like mine have been tasked to do. And that is read God's word and tell you what it means in light of the times in which we live, to keep God's word fresh, to help you understand that it has a contemporary, we need it in our contemporary times. And the thing is, if I fail at that part of my job, which my job is lots of parts, but if I fail at that part of my job, then the Bible becomes irrelevant, which is the last thing. I mean, that's going to happen over my cold, dead corpse, because I am very dedicated and devoted to helping you see the life-giving power of God's word. It gets me out of bed in the morning, and it drives me all day, even trying to figure out how to get that stupid camera to hook to the computer. I do that so that we have more avenues to help you realize that how relevant God's word is. And so I've been doing that all along. Now, if all the other sermons through all of time that there have been about the other guy in the book of Ruth, I'm sure that while there may have been a few of them on confidence, he probably covered a whole gambit of issues. What I mean is we take these same stories and we read them and we see there's a timeless truth revealed in them. And then we interpret it based on how it speaks to the world today. Am I making any sense? Somebody get in the comments and tell me if I'm even still online. I haven't heard from you guys in a while. Are you following what I'm saying? The purpose of pastors and preachers and teachers and rabbis we are to help you see the contemporary application of God's word. And to fail to do that is to fail at my job. So what I'm saying is, and why this is so important is, if we ever say, okay, here is this biblical passage, and it applies, and we're about to see how Daniel's vision is going to apply very, very specifically to the Persian and the Mede Empire. Okay? For us to say that Daniel's vision only applies to the Persian Empire means there's no reason for us to be reading it tonight. If we say that that's all it was about and it's about nothing else, then there's no purpose. Then I am wasting your time to be here to read this tonight. If there's no way to interpret the ram and this crazy mythological goat with the horn and the floaties. If there's no way to interpret that other than to say it's going to speak to Daniel's contemporary experience, if that's all it is, then this has nothing to say to us today, which I vehemently disagree with. I believe God's word speaks to us every day. It may speak to us differently tomorrow than it does today, but it speaks every single day. And it is relevant every minute of every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, of every decade, of every century, of every millennia. It is valuable in all of those circumstances. So that's why that's why I'm very cautious in helping you see how this would have been interpreted in Daniel's time, because to say that that's it applied to Daniel's situation and we're all done, says might as well throw it away. I mean, there's no point in reading it now. I completely disagree with that. So Gabriel is going to say, Daniel, here's what it means to you. Here's the specific things it addresses. Here's the specific ways it's going to be interpreted. Here's specifically how it works. And here's what you're supposed to take out of it in your time, 2,500, 3,000 years ago, whatever it was. That's great because it does apply to Daniel's time, but that's not where it ends. And that's what is, especially in these Old Testament stories, that's what is so important to see, is there's so many people who want to throw out the Old Testament because the New Testament's all that matters anyways. Wrong. We have these stories for a reason. We may have a concept now that the Old Testament folks didn't have, a concept called grace and mercy, but that doesn't mean that these stories don't have a truth in them. They absolutely do. So as we go through Gabriel's explanation to Daniel, I don't want you to think that this is the definitive interpretation that explains Daniel's dream, and there's absolutely nothing else we can get out of it, because I believe that there are still rams that are causing problems. I still believe that there are goats that God sends to save us, and those goats may not be perfect, and they may be flawed people, but they can serve God's purpose if they want to be faithful. That's where we are. So Gabriel is going to say, here's how it applies to you. And then Tim is going to say, this is how this applies to you. Okay? I'm not equating myself with angels. Trust me on that one. But the role that Gabriel is about to play for Daniel is the role I desire to play for you. I desire to play this role every Sunday, every night that we log into YouTube. I want to help you walk away saying, wow, that really does mean something to us today. And so that's what we're going to get to. Okay. That's my disclaimer, and there we go. So let's see how Gabriel does this for Daniel, and then we will talk about how we can do that for us. And I completely lost my place. Okay, verse 19. Then he said, I'm here to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. What you have seen pertains to the very end of time. The end of time meaning the end of the exile. Remember, they're in exile. They've been drug out. They were drug out by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians were conquered by the Medes, and then the Medes were conquered by the Persians. So they've kind of been passed around in all these different places. Y'all know what they want to do. They want to go home, and they want to return. And that's what they're working toward. Okay? All right. Okay, verse 20. In Daniel's time, Gabriel says, the two-horned ram represents the kings of Media and Persia. Okay, those two are the two that conquered Babylon, the Babylonians, and now they're ruling. So they were the ones who kicked out the previous empire, which was Babylon. So Babylon was wiped out. Now it was the Medes and the Persians. Now what's going to happen to them? Verse 21. The shaggy male goat represents the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn between his eyes represents the first king of the Greek Empire. Who are the Greeks? Somebody get in the comments. Tell me who the Greeks are. Yes, I know they're the goat, but who are they in history? Who are the Greeks? I think Tim Dickey said this last night, if I'm not mistaken. In history, who are the Greeks? Does anybody know? Anybody know? Got any history buffs in here? Anybody know who the Greeks end up being? They form a big empire, makes a huge impact on the New Testament. One of the epistles was written to them, starts with an R. Allison and Jody Poff named their son after this place. They become the Romans, and that's who the Greeks eventually turn into. Now, they're not at first, but as they continue to go through and conquer and take over things, they are part of the Roman Empire. Very good. So that's who they become. They become the Romans. So that's who the goat is. Now the goat, as you read, becomes a significant problem. I ask you in New Testament times, did the Romans become a significant problem? I'll go ahead and answer for you. The answer is yes. The Romans occupied the Holy Land because they took it from the Medes and the Persians, who had taken it from the Babylonians, who had taken it from the people of God. So this fight had been going on for a significant amount of time, and this is leading to the rise of the Roman Empire, which will come quite some time later. But that's who's going to overthrow the next kingdom. Okay, so the first of the Greek Empire. The four prominent horns that replace the large horn show that the Greek Empire will break into four kingdoms, but none as great as the first. Again, we know all this. At the end of their rule, when their sin is at its height, a fierce king, a master of intrigue, will rise to power. Oh, Joe, I hope that means you found my cord. Master of intrigue. Now, we may ask ourselves, who's the master of intrigue? Well, let me tell you about a certain Roman ruler that was significantly hated in the Bible, hated more than anyone else. It was a Caesar called Nero. Now, Nero was an interesting guy, and he was one of the last he's the one that burned down Rome because he wanted to rebuild it, and he wanted to blame the Christians because apparently Christians like burning things. You know, we talk about the Holy Spirit fire, and he was just a real clown. But Nero was the people loved him because he was theatrical and he could sing and he could dance. He would put on plays. He loved to put on festivals where he would go do crazy things, and the common people loved him. But the guy hated Christianity, and I mean hated it passionately. And in fact, they hated Christianity, or Nero hated Christianity so much in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, which some of you have noticed the correlation between the second half of Daniel Revelation, very close, in the ancient world, and the way Greek writing happened, because that's the way the New Testament was recorded. We here in English have four different symbol sets. In order for me, like you guys are writing in the comments, what do you see in there? You see lowercase letters, you see uppercase letters, and you see numbers, and you see punctuation, and you see vowels. 5 things. Lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, punctuation, and vowels. And I'll actually throw in another one, spaces between the words. So when we're writing, we need to know how to use all of those things. Some of us use them better than others. Thank God for proofreaders. But in order to communicate in writing in English, you've got to have at least a rudimentary understanding of lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, punctuation, vowels, and spaces. Greek had none of those things. Okay? That's right, Tim. Nero was the last one because he was the most insane. But in Roman, in Greek writing, which was very, very basic writing, they didn't use vowels. It was all consonants. They didn't use spaces between the words. They didn't use punctuation. They didn't have a separate set of symbols for numbers, and they didn't have punctuation. So whenever we get something written in actual Greek, not only is it written the opposite way that we read, it's written from right to left, it's all one word. It's all one word, all rammed together. There are no spaces, and all the words are nothing but consonants. You have to guess what the vowels are. Vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, is a relatively recent phenomenon. Now, I tell you all this to say this. There's a certain number that you find in the book of Revelation. It's a couple of sixes that we all get real bent out of shape about. But what you got to realize is in the ancient world, there was no distinguishing between numbers and letters. I know that's hard for us to understand. I mean, how can you have a 2 and a Z? I mean, they're not the same thing at all. But in the ancient world, it didn't work that way. Letters and numbers were the same set of symbols. So in the book of Revelation that you'll read, well, now I'm not going to tell you who this guy is, but anybody who has discernment can figure it out. The number of his name is the 3 6s. Well, if you translate the numbers to letters, anybody want to guess what you spell? You spell Nero. That's exactly right. So Nero was the guy they really, really hated. So much so that he is referred to as the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. Now, do I believe he is the only Antichrist who's ever been? Absolutely not. But in the era of the New Testament, Nero was the representation of the Antichrist. And there have been countless others down through the ages, but he was the first. And so when he says here in this great apocalypse writing here that when he says at the end of their rule, when their sin was at its height, a fierce king, a master of intrigue, will rise to power. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause a shocking amount of destruction and succeed in everything he does. He will destroy powerful leaders and devastate holy people. Nero did all of this stuff. He will become a master of deception and be arrogant. The guy was a stage actor. That's what he did. He could sing and he could dance. He could do all this stuff. But he would also be the guy that would knife you in the back and not think twice about it. He would destroy many without warning. He will even take on the prince of princes in battle. And notice that prince is capitalized if you follow along here. We refer to him as the Prince of Peace, but that's the same idea. But he will be broken, though not by human power. Nero committed suicide. So the idea here is that they're looking ahead to what's going to happen to this new empire that's going to rise. Now, that's the interpretation from Daniel's day. That's the interpretation from the days of the New Testament and slightly after the New Testament. Okay, referring back to all these things that are going to happen. In their contemporary time period, that's how they could interpret them. Now, was Nero the last great leader who was a deceiver? Was Nero the last one to be hungry for power? Was Nero the last one to abuse his power that he got? Was Nero the last one to go to war with God's principles? Was Nero the last one to try to destroy God's people in this world? Absolutely not. That's why God's word is so powerful, is it is able to speak truth to every generation, including ours. So my friends, and I don't want anybody to start getting political here. I'm not at all interested in that, and I'm not going to do it either. But I just want you to think about our world. Do we have people who behave like the ram, who try to conquer and take things that aren't theirs, which is exactly what the Medes and the Persians did, to take things that don't belong to them. It's what the Babylonians did. Do we have people then who will conquer those people to take their stuff, not to give it back, but to keep it for themselves, like the goat did, like the Romans did? We still see this going on all the time today. It's just about how God is not surprised by these things because he's seen it all before. And that's what the power of the book of these visions from Daniel is. It's about Daniel's. Hitler is another extremely prime example, Cheryl. I mean, there are, again, many others, but Hitler is a very good example of what we're talking about. He tried to do exactly what Nero did. And he only tried to, he was just an evil man, just like the rest of them. So, okay, let me read the rest of this, and then I'm going to say a little more about it. Verse 26. This vision about the 2,300 evenings and mornings is true, but none of these things will happen for a long time, which they won't happen for a long time. So keep this vision a secret. Then I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for several days. Afterward, I got up and performed my duties for the king, but I was greatly troubled by the vision, and I could not understand it. 9 o'clock already? My goodness. All right. The biggest takeaway I want you to take from this is that this vision of danger, this vision of threat, this vision of fear, this vision of all these things, was very real to Daniel. Obviously, it was real to him. It made him sick. It upset him so bad. He was afraid of the ram. He was afraid of the goat. The goat may have conquered the ram, but the goat really wasn't any better than the ram, and so on and so forth. Friends, what Daniel realized, though, is that Gabriel, God's representative, came and stood beside him. God is still doing that today. When we face things that frighten us, again, we may not be frightened by a mythical goat, but whatever we're looking at, whatever we're facing, whether it be COVID-19 or something in your personal life, we have a chance to know that the Lord is standing beside us. And that's what Daniel realized. Even though he was frightened to the point he was sick, he still knew the power of God with him, and that God was still active in what was going on. And that's what I need you guys to hang on to very, very tightly, because that's a message that is timeless. And yesterday, today, and tomorrow, Jess, that's exactly right. And that's what I need you guys. That's the lesson I want you guys to take tonight. Where Gabriel interpreted it in terms of what was going on in his world, I'm trying to help you interpret it in terms of what's going on in yours. And that is the fact that in all of these things and all this craziness, God is the one we're still going to turn our head and see standing beside us, and not like way back behind us, but right there with us. So children's message tomorrow. Do I need to watch the video that's shot on my camera, Jess? Is that what you're saying? So, all right. So that's what I want you guys to take from this and the visions that we're having. All right. All right. Hey, I'm glad you guys all are here. Are you guys still enjoying this? These lessons are really hard to do in this format. The history books are so much easier than these because there's just so many moving parts to these lessons. So I hope. Yeah. Give me a thumbs up on the video, guys. I'd appreciate that. So, yeah. So very good. And I guess that's the big takeaway. Am I concerned that you remember a flying goat? No, I don't care about the flying goat. What I do want you to take away from this is the fact that God has an annoying tendency to always be present. And oh my, Revelation! You guys really want to tackle that one? Revelation would be an interesting study after this one, because they're very, very, very similar. But yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm just going to tell you now, I do have 2 more books that I got from that guy who I think sent them to me by accident. And if you're not going to be here on Sunday for the parking lot service, I'm praying to God we're able to have. Let me know, and I will make arrangements to get one of these to you. I'll have 2. So if 20 of you text me, I'm not going to be able to get it to everybody. So, but yeah, and I got a few more should be here hopefully by Thursday. So, all right, everybody good? Everybody having a good evening here. I do hope you're enjoying these. We got 40 people logged in here tonight. Man, I love you guys. I really do. I never in my wildest dreams for a moment thought that we would be able to sustain these nightly meetings for 2 months. I never dreamed we would do that. You guys have just been crushing it. Man, I just appreciate you so much. It is so awesome that you make the opportunity to be here. Joyce is going to be here in her white granny van. Well, we know we can't have a party without Joyce Koenig, so I sure hope you're showing up, Joyce. So, all right. Well, fantastic. I think I'm good for tonight. I am going to draw a line here so I know where we stopped. Good. Well, I appreciate you guys. Am I still here? Did I get kicked out? I had a thing pop up on my screen says my connection was unstable, and I hope I'm still here. So, all right, guys. Hey, I love you all very much. You seriously you honor me more than I could ever say by spending your evenings here with me. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all very much. I'm looking forward to finishing Daniel, but I'm really actually kind of looking forward to this. So I'm looking forward to giving this a read too. So I think we'll have a good time with that. So, all right, guys, I love you all very much. Y'all know what you need to go do now, right? Everybody knows what happens now. Same thing Pastor Tim says every night. That's right. Go wash your hands.